Well, I will say two things there. I think one, Howie is a hustler. He'll be wheeling and dealing come draft day, and he'll find a partner to dance with making a deal. I do believe that, and he does like to pull the trigger before we get to the draft too. So I think you might see that.
You got your Mac guys, number 365, McMullen and McDonald. We just had Ric Serritella there. He's going to rejoin us in just a couple of seconds. He's having some computer issues. When he's ready to punch him up, we'll do just that. Yes, the draft is still a couple months away, but the combine is less than a week away. So that means we're in the Ric Serritella NFL Draft Bible season. How are you, Ricky?
I'll tell you guys, you're making me excited with the Ocean Casino Resort. I'll be down there later today. So,
all right. Yeah. Well, shout out. Yeah, that's right. We call it Howie season here in the Delaware Valley, as you know, Rick. But I call it Ric season, Ric Serritella season. NFL draft.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess this is interesting to me. So I guess I'll start here. We had Chris Landry on last week, and back in the day, Chris ran the scouting combine, and I've talked to a lot of personnel people over the years, and they all say the same thing. There's never, ever 32 first round grades when you look at the board. So I want to ask Ric Serritella, and this is very important for us locally because Philadelphia, the Eagles start this process with 15, 16, and 19. So how many legit first-round grades do you think there are? Because it usually falls off right about there, that 15 to 20 range.
Yeah, I think on average, you usually see about 15 to 18 first-round picks that would translate to any year. This year, I just did a big board the other day. I slotted Kenny Pickett at 10. He's a second-round grade in my book, so I guess I would have 9 first round grades.
Yeah, that's not good. That's not
that doesn't work well when the Eagles have picks in the teams. And I guess I understand where you guys are coming from, but there are 32 picks in the first round. So the first 32 guys you put on your big board are first round draft grades. Now you might say in 2022 compared to 2017, well, it's just not the same. Okay, you can make that comparison, but aren't there 32 first round draft picks every year? Isn't that kind of the way it works?
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I think there has to be, right? But if Kenny Pickett was in the draft last year, what is he, the 6th, QB7?
Yeah, Is it that bad? Wow.
Would you take him ahead of Mac Jones, who was the 5th quarterback, right? So he would have probably been the 6th quarterback, right?
Yeah, it's a good point.
Justin Fields, I think, went evenly. I mean,
yeah.
If I'm the Eagles, to me, and I'm not a huge fan of Jalen Hurts, I understand the capability there, and I think you ride it out another year just because why invest a first-round pick unless you're convinced, and a lot of people will tell you that Kenny Pickett is pretty convincing behind closed doors when you get him on the whiteboard and the personality and everything else, all the intangibles. But to me, it's like, hey, ride it out because why trade up? Why risk all those draft picks for a quarterback if you don't really believe he's an upgrade over Jalen?
Well, let me come at it this way then, Rick, because it's not a normal year for an NFL team when you start with 3 first-round picks. So, maybe there's a little bit of I've called it a sense of urgency. So, you have a 23-year-old evolving player. If Kenny Pickett's number one on your board at 19, you're forced to take all these 3 first-round picks. Why not have 2 darts at the dartboard at the game's most important position and say, all right, maybe, there's only 20 or 30% chance this guy becomes a star, but now we have 2, maybe 20 or 30% chances, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I will say 2 things there. I think one, Howie is a hustler. He'll be wheeling and dealing come draft day, and he'll find a partner to dance with making a deal. I do believe that, and he does like to pull the trigger before we get to the draft too. So I think you might see that. Now, with that being said, I like the fact that he subscribes to the Bill Walsh philosophy. If you look at the track history of Howie Roseman, he takes a quarterback almost every draft. Now, it might not necessarily be a first-round guy, but I like the fact that, hey, you've got Montana, then you got Young, then you got Bono, then you got Gerback. I mean, they were just a quarterback manufacturer. And say what you want, Sam Bradford, he fooled a lot of folks, but then they had Carson Wentz. Then they had Jalen Hurts in the pocket. They drafted Clayton Thorson one year. They took Nate Sudfeld. So to me, if you see a guy like Carson Strong slide to day 2, I don't think it hurts to have a kid like that in there competing and having a contingency plan such as that. So I do think they'll take a quarterback. It's hard to justify in the first round, but why not build off of all this momentum? They exceeded expectations. No one had them pegged for the playoffs. Sirianni was the first rookie coach to take his team to the playoffs, I believe. So to me, there's a lot to build on. Ride it till the wheels fall off. And if Hurts doesn't get the job done, I think you reassess it next season.
I'm just thrilled with the Steve Bono reference, by the way, Rick. I got excited by the Steve Bono.
Oh, by the way, quarterback factory or not, I don't think you get credit for Clayton Thorson being a high USFL draft pick. Not sure how he's fucking that one up as a win.
Come on, Jody. That's the 5th overall pick of the USFL draft, Clayton Thorson. And by the way, Kyle Lauletta, number 7, the Eagles quarterback factory. 25%.
How long was Kyle Lauletta here? They getting credit for Kyle Lauletta too? They didn't draft him. Stop it, McMullen. Anyway, we were talking wide receiver before you came on, Rick. And John said if they can't maneuver, they can't trade out of the first round. They don't want to take all 3 first picks, but if they don't have a dance partner to trade with, they may have to take all 3 of those picks. And then John said, then I guess there's a possibility they could take a wide receiver. How good is this wide receiver class? Is it one that at the pick 19 or somewhere thereabouts, they could get a guy who can step right in and play and certainly be better than Jalen Reagor? If we're talking about not making a wide receiver pick in the first round, second, third, day 3, give me a general overall read on the wide receiver class in this year's draft.
Well, I think wide receiver is one of the positions of great depth in this year's draft. I wouldn't say it's necessarily top heavy. You might see 2 or 3, wide receiver ones. I think you'll see a handful come off in the first round, but I do think this is a position, if you do wait, because of the jumboed draft class last year, for comparison, we had 725 players draft eligible on our board. This year we're over 1,300, and wide receiver, there's like over 200 players listed on the board. That's how deep it is. But in terms of studs, right around 15, you might get, and for me, if I'm an Eagles fan, I want to see one of these big-bodied wide receivers like a Drake London from USC, a Treylon Burks from Arkansas. Burks is a big-bodied possession wideout. They kind of moved him around as a chess piece at Arkansas and used him that way. So I think he would be an excellent fit. Drake London, I think, is probably the most dynamic wide receiver. He missed the last 4 games due to injury. So does the first wide receiver on the board kind of slide? It's a possibility. I think the other Ohio State receivers are in the mix there. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. And then you want to throw, I got my board here, Jamison Williams from Alabama in the mix. Now, he would be maybe a top 10 pick, but he tore his ACL in that national championship. Not the same kind of injury as 10 years ago. These guys bounce back from that kind of injury in no time. So those are your top round guys. Now, I went to the scouting trails. I've been to 3 or 4 all-star games. Velus Jones from Tennessee. I mean, all he did at the Senior Bowl was cut loose. I think he hit 22 miles per hour on the catapult tracking system, which a lot of evaluators now are putting a lot of stock into the peak speed that a player can reach in game as opposed to the 40-yard dash. Velus Jones is a guy, I don't think he's getting a lot of media hype today, but next week after the combine, he sure will be. Khalil Shakir from Boise State, another slot wideout that's pretty dynamic in his own right. So there's a lot of depth in this year's class. There's a kid out of Western Kentucky, Jarrett Stearns. Remember that name. 5'7", led the nation in wide receiving, combine snub, unguardable all week long at the East-West Shrine Bowl. This kid, he might not get drafted. he's going to hang around for a while at the next level.
Hey, Rick, one position I guarantee the Eagles are going to come out of with somebody on April 28th is edge rusher. And there's one guy, because everyone this has become a copycat league. Everybody wants to be the Rams now. You constantly hear everybody want to plays multiple fronts, be able to give the 4-3 looks, the 3-4 looks. Tell me about Trayvon Walker from Georgia, because that's the kid that he looks like an edge, plays inside. You can move him all over the place. That to me seems like a perfect fit of what Jonathan Gannon would like.
Yeah, to that point, right? I mean, we used to call these guys tweeners, and it was a bad thing. Now you're a hybrid guy, and you can be moved all around, and I think you're seeing a lot of that at the NFL. Trayvon Walker is a guy, to your point, he can play inside, he can play outside. Quick first step, nice hands, heavy hands, could even stand up. So, to me, with Walker, he did benefit, though, having a lot of talent around him, right? And that defense, like, the opposing offensive line, they had to pick and choose their poison there. And so he did benefit from a lot of one-on-one matchups. And so do I think he's as polished as some of the other pass rushers that can get after the quarterback? I don't know if I have him in the top half of the first round. I do think he slides in to the back end of the first round. And to me, we talked about last year, I think 5 quarterbacks in the first round. If last year was the year of the quarterback, this year is the year of the edge rusher. I mean, I think there is going to be at least half a dozen edge rushers. I could see 5 defensive ends. There is a very talented edge rusher group here, and there's a lot of variety too.
All right, 2-point question. Number one, if we're talking about edge guys, I think Hutchinson and Thibodeau were unquestionably gone long before the Eagles draft. Those would be the top 2 guys, at least in my grouping. If you put these guys in the next group, Karlaftis from Purdue, Walker, as you just mentioned, Ajabo, Michigan, and Jermaine Johnson of Florida State, how would you rank those 3 guys?
I think Johnson has the highest floor. I think he can really contribute immediately. I think Ajabo has the highest ceiling because he's just so raw. He came over from Nigeria in the 8th grade. He grew up playing basketball and soccer. The game is just really his best football is ahead of him. And you take a look at the measurements, the arm length, he will test well. I think, if you're betting on the rawness, like the kid from out of Penn State that Baltimore took that had 0 sack, well, Baltimore turned him into a player. I think that's what you're getting with Ajabo. But I got to say, to me, Karlaftis, I mean, he's a man-child. I think he doesn't get enough credit for just how gargantuous he is. He understands technique. He understands leverage. He even knows how to contain. And I remember going into Penn State, as a matter of fact, his freshman year, I had no idea who George Karlaftis is. I was scouting somebody on the Penn State offensive side, and Karlaftis just kept coming into my binoculars. Who's this guy blowing up the backfield? And that was his freshman season. So he came in, made it an immediate impact. I think that his upside isn't as great as a Hutchinson or Kayvon, but I do think that he's a solid plug-and-play guy that, at the end of the season, he's going to be a consistent 7, 8, 9 sack type of guy.
Rick, corner would be the other slot that everybody is focused on for the Eagles. Interesting kid that I like that seems to be peaking at the right time. I know Daniel Jeremiah had him up higher in the draft than a lot of people had, but that's Trent McDuffie from Washington. Is that the range you see him in, that 15, 16, 19, 15 to 20 range, a kid like that?
Yeah, he's somebody, too, playing on the West Coast that I was kind of late to come around on, and DJ's out there in Cali now, so he's all over the Washington kids. But, yeah, they have a pair of corners. McDuffie kind of being the speedier guy. He's going to be one of these guys at the Combine who probably runs sub 4.4. So he's got speed. He's got quicks. He can cover. And so I like what he brings to the table. I think that after you get past those first 2 guys, which is Stingley out of LSU and Sauce Gardner from Cincinnati, I think they can go either way. I like Stingley for my money. I think it's really wide open. Kaiir Elam from Florida, I think, is also in the equation there in the first round. But I think McDuffie is right there in the middle to late round. And he's a little bit shorter than some of these other guys, but he can definitely compensate.
All right, this was the second half of the question I was going to ask you earlier that I forgot to ask. John brought up the defensive lineman from Georgia. Who's the best defensive player on the best defense in college football last year? Projecting going forward to the NFL, not necessarily fitting in on the team that he's drafted. You hope that's the case, but just pure talent evaluation. Who's going to be the best player off that Georgia defense starting next year in the NFL?
I like Jordan Davis, the defensive tackle, for my money. He's a really big, explosive man. It's hard to believe that he can move that agile for weighing 350 pounds. Now, will he go as high as I would take him? He might not, because at one point he was up to like 390, borderline 400 pounds. And again, when you're investing a first round pick, you know, you might have a weight stipulation, but you really want to sit down and find out, like, hey, is this something that coach had to worry about? Is this something we're going to have to worry about moving forward? But when you talk about pound for pound, and there's a lot of pounds there, Jordan Davis, I mean, he's quick, he's fast, he's explosive, he's a monster. He gobbles double teams, triple teams. And really, he when we talked about Walker benefiting from some of those other linemen there for the Bulldogs, I mean, I think Davis was a big factor in terms of taking on bodies and allowing other guys to run through those lanes and make plays.
All right, so John likes Walker. You like Davis. I'll take Nakobe Dean. I think he's going to be the best defensive player. Now, we know the Eagles don't take linebackers in the first round. It's only been 30. So they just don't do it.
1979. Jerry Robinson. He's got champagne on ice. He's got the champagne.
Jerry, here's a question I have. Will Jerry Robinson crack a bottle of champagne when the Eagles pass on the first round linebacker again?
He's our local version of the 72 Dolphins. Yeah, Jerry Robinson.
We shall see. Any chance the Eagles take a linebacker in the first round? And is Nakobe Dean the best linebacker in this draft, John? Rick?
You know, I don't know if the Eagles go linebacker, but I will say Nakobe Dean and Devin Lloyd from Utah are probably my top two guys. You could flip a coin. They're both great. They both cover a lot of ground laterally. They both stick their nose in there and fill the hole in a hurry. So Nakobe Dean cleaned up a lot of that mess there at Georgia for the stuff that did get into the second level. So I do see him probably in the top 15 to 20. You know, with Lloyd, there's kind of a difference of opinion if he's a Mike or a Will. I think you can maybe, you know, move him around and play in a multiple hybrid scheme. I think Dean is definitely your man in the middle.
Can we get a difference of opinion that turns them into Micah Parsons, Rick?
Right. I mean, hey. That what Micah Parsons did, and 1979, I thought the Giants were bad at taking linebackers. That's an incredible amount of time. But Micah Parsons, to the Cowboys scheme and credit, they took a guy that was a chess piece, like we talked about these hybrid schemes. How many guys said, "Hey, Micah Parsons was the top edge rusher coming out of the draft last year"? But he was, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. And everybody looked at the length and said he was. I thought he looked like more of a. I'm going to pat myself on the back. I thought he looked like more of an edge rusher than a natural linebacker. But I was concerned because he doesn't have the size to be a typical edge rusher. And all of a sudden, he's like, he can do whatever. He can do whatever you ask him to do. Now, the one guy I look at, but he's way too high, and my favorite player in this draft is the kid from Notre Dame. I think he's going to be a superstar. I think Kyle Hamilton, I think he's going to play safety, but he can move them up. And we talk about hybrids all the time. He can play basically anywhere from linebacker to back to safety. How high is Kyle Hamilton going to go? Because people don't like taking safeties that high in the draft, but I think he's more than a safety.
No, I agree with you, John. And for my money, it's Thibodeau 1, it's Kyle Hamilton 2. If you're just talking about pure talent, this guy can do it all. He can play every position in the secondary. He could slide down in the box. He could be a true center fielder. He's got great instincts, great wrap-up ability in the open field. There's not much he can't do. He can cover. He can tackle. He can be moved around. To me, at the end of the day, Jacksonville is there at number one. I think that protecting their asset there at quarterback is going to be the priority. And I do think if they were to stay pat, it would be a tackle. But you really wouldn't get any beef here if it was Kyle Hamilton. I mean, he is that good, that talented. I'm trying to think of the last safety that was that good coming out of college, and he's right up there with the best of them.
All right. You told us earlier the wide receiver group this year, compared to last year, you had 3 wide receivers taken in the top 10 picks. You don't necessarily believe that it should be that kind of a group this year, but you said the depth was there and you might be able to get a wide receiver, a pretty talented one, in a later round at a better value than in the first round. How about the cornerback position? Because the Eagles are going to take a corner, guaranteed, whether it's with one of their first 3 first-round picks or later in. How does this top of the draft cornerback and depth of the cornerback position play in this year's selections?
It's funny because we mentioned some of the slot corners. There's really, I think, only 7 or 8 or maybe 9 slot corners with a draftable grade. It was kind of hard finding those guys because you look at the board, and I remember when 6'1", 200-pound corners that run 4.4 were rare birds. Now they're a common thing. I mean, the length on these guys are just unbelievable. So I do think that if you're looking for an outside corner, I think the depth is greater there. The slot corners are a little bit thin. I think you'll see them come off the board in a flurry in the middle rounds if you're looking for a slot guy. But yeah, I think overall it's adequate depth. It's not as great as the wide receiver. If I was to rank the positional depth on defense, I would say, edge rushers, obviously one, safeties. There's a handful of good ones. Lewis Sign is another potential first round guy out of Georgia, Daxton from Michigan. So I think safety is probably 2. Corner is probably 3. So I think there's adequate depth there, just trying to run through the board off the top of the head here. Yeah.
All right, Rick, last one from me and Ric Serritella, NFL Draft Bible. To start Rick's season, it's probably unfair because we're way too early in the process, but what the heck, we're just having fun. I want to pin you down. Everybody loves the quarterbacks. How many quarterbacks are going to go in the first round? We're basically talking about Pickett, Matt Corral, Sam Howell, Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder. You mentioned Carson Strong. Those are the top 6 quarterbacks. How many of those go? And you got 32nd pick. Everybody, hey, 50-year option for a quarterback if he hits. How many of those guys get pushed up?
I do think at the end of the day, it's a quarterback league. You look at all the teams in the playoffs, the common denominator for most of them is they had a good quarterback. So I think you look around the league, all the teams that need a quarterback, all the quarterbacks that have retired, I still think it only takes one. And I still think that there's going to be an owner, a GM, a coach that pounds the table, trades up for the number 1 overall selection. Someone's going to justify it and make sense of it. I'm still a believer of that. So I do think number 1, I do think will be Kenny Pickett. Malik Willis, when you're talking about just traits, the film, there's some issues there with the accuracy, but when you're just talking about the modern day traits of what an NFL quarterback should be, Malik Willis has that. And I think, because of that, he goes inside the top 10. And then, I think Desmond Ridder is kind of the dark horse first round guy that doesn't get the hype. He's going to jump through the gymnasium, by the way, out there at the Lucas Oil Stadium. So when you have a quarterback that can throw that way and then runs a 4.4 40, I think that's going to be alluring and sexy to a weak quarterback class. So I think Ridder sneaks in there. Strong has a lot of medical stuff with the vertebrae and collarbone, so I don't see him as a round 1 guy. Howell, I think he's right up there. I struggle with justifying a first round pick on Howell. So I guess my answer is 3 guys.
3? Well, and you're under evaluating Matt Corral, but you and I have discussed this all year long. I'm a bigger Corral fan than you are. We'll see what their NFL careers turn into.
He's right on the fence. He could go right on the fence there. Yep.
And I'm not talking about where he's selected. I'm talking about projecting what I think he's going to do when he gets to the league. But we got to wait years for that to happen. All right, Ricky. I also have to ask you about interior offensive line, because the Eagles always seem to come back to the offensive line. It's one of their key tenets and philosophies in building through the draft, and they've been pretty damn good at it. So why would they give up on it? I think they're good at the tackle positions. I'd be surprised if they go first round with a tackle. So it's going to be someone inside. Everyone has the Tyler Linderbaum as the number one interior offensive lineman as a center, which is saying a lot. Mm-hmm. Any others that if Linderbaum is gone and they say we got to take an offensive, is there any other interior offensive lineman who deserves to be taken in the first 20 picks of this draft?
Absolutely. I'm looking at Zion Johnson from Boston College, someone the coaching staff about 2 years ago put on my radar and said, this guy, we can't kick him out of the film room. He trains and works like a pro. He's played, I think, all 5 positions there at Boston College. But when you talk about size, bend, flexibility, he can pull, he can get into the second level. He can even step in, I think, and play tackle in a pinch if you need him to at the next level. So Zion Johnson from Boston College would be my guy. I think you can definitely justify a first-round pick in this year's draft based on his body of work at the Senior Bowl alone. He was one of the most dominant players I thought down there. So I'll give you a sleeper too. This kid I saw out at the East-West Shrine Bowl from Illinois, Vidarian Lowe. And I think they had him playing right tackle out there. He might have to kick inside at the next level, but this guy's demeanor, his toughness, his nastiness, a lot of people like Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa maybe to possibly kick inside. I would say Vidarian Lowe is in that same category. Like, hey, you might try him outside. If it doesn't work out, you might have a starter for the next decade at the interior.
All right, one last thing, and I know you understand the combine well. There have been changes to the combine just this week that they've taken the bubble off, so the kids are going to be able to have their instructors and workout guys and nutritionalists. The NFL tried to do it via lockdown. They didn't get away with it, or the combine didn't get away with it. Give me something that happens at the combine, be it a drill or something that the NFL can get out of these players as far as information goes, that's changed, that's garnering more attention than it did 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That's something that they try and unearth at the combine that just in general NFL teams are putting more emphasis on going forward and evaluating these kids.
I think it's analytics, and I think it's trickling more and more into the combine coverage, and it's hard for me to gauge because a lot of times at the combine, we're just in a media room watching the combine with no audio. But I do see them flash to the next gen stats a lot of time, and we alluded to that earlier, how teams are placing greater emphasis on miles per hour instead of 40-yard dash times. I do think, especially, and I hate to say it this way, with the younger influx of general managers and coaches. I mean, some of these guys look like they just graduated college. They believe in this stuff, and there's new stats, change of direction, quickness, and makeup, recovery time for corners, for example, is a new thing. And so I think that you might not be hearing about that or seeing about it on the front lines, but behind the scenes, this information, courtesy of Amazon, by the way, this is made available to general managers and executives and not to the NFL Players Association agents. And so this is another thing when the contract negotiations come up, the NFL has this data to use against you, so to speak. The agents don't have that data to counter or highlight some of the positive data. So it's pretty interesting.
Well, then I got to ask a follow-up question. So all the players are wired at the combine? How did they come up with the numbers? How does Amazon track this to give to the teams to use an evaluation?
There's so much technology out there now, Jody. It's a combination. So they do have these wearables such as Catapult that you'll hear, and the players don't even realize it's so light. They don't even realize it's on their body. There's also these chips in every single ball that they use at the combine. So now you're getting the spin velocity like a baseball. You're getting that for the football. How fast did the spirals spin on the velocity of his throws? We've seen the miles per hour stats now come out with the NFL. So the chips in the ball, and then also now there's monitor technology where you can literally get the miles per hour of a speed as they're going down the combine. You could just pull it off your screen now. That's how much the technology has enhanced.
And let me just say, Rick, I hope the NFL is better at utilizing it than Major League Baseball, because they've done some bad things with that particular.
Can we bring back the glow puck though? I like that.
Yeah, the glow puck. I'd like the glow puck too, because I couldn't see where the real damn puck was.
Our technology doesn't always match up with what the leagues are using. But Ricky, it is always a pleasure. Whenever you join us, thank you much for doing so. We're going to tap into you plenty between now and the draft. Check out his podcast every day on the SI. I got a couple of SI guys working with today on the Sports Illustrated website. NFL Draft Podcast. Mr. Serritella, thank you very much. Have a good time in Indianapolis.
Appreciate you. Absolutely.
Ric Serritella, NFL Draft Bible, here with us on Birds 365. Yes, Rick.
Yeah, I cringe. But I will say, the Eagles talk about this GPS stuff a lot as well. And they've been, kind of at the forefront of analytics, and they were one of the first teams, and they take pride in that kind of stuff. But, then again, I would, because I think it's more important, and Rick brought up 40 speed versus, essentially field speed in the miles per hour. Would have been nice to know that Jalen Reagor's 40 speed didn't translate to the field, but why didn't the Eagles know that? I don't know.
Hasn't worked out. We touched on Mr. Reagor earlier. Get ready for it. There's going to be another Jalen Reagor year here in Philadelphia. They are not moving away from him, no matter what the analytics say, positive or negative. The contract says Jalen Reagor's going nowhere fast. All right, McMullen and McDonald coming back. We've still got another good guest to join us. There's been a lot. We haven't touched on that much here on Birds 365, but a lot of stuff has gone down in Tampa over the last couple of weeks, starting with Tom Brady's retirement. Or maybe not. Tom Brady's disenchantment with his coaching staff down there in Tampa. Or maybe not. Is Tampa going to replace Tom Brady? We are continuing to talk about Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. And could they be traded? And would be the Eagles involved? What's Tampa going to do at quarterback if Brady doesn't decide to unretire between now and September? We had Ira Kaufman on during the Bucs playoff run when the Eagles were eliminated by the Bucs. Good dude, does a great job for JoeBucksFan.com. I thought there was some interesting stories emanating from Tampa this week. So we're going to punch up Ira Kaufman a little bit later. When we come back, I got several more things Eagle related I want to run by my partner, John McMullen, here on Birds 360.